During this session I'm going to look at editing a high noise nature image. This image was taken back at an outing with CPA and down at Oxford Island. As you can see, it was taken at 1/1000th of a second, f6.3, but the ISO was pumped right away up to 12,800. Under normal circumstances you wouldn't even contemplate using anything at that. So I'm going to try processing it both in Lightroom and how I would process this type of image in Photoshop to show you the contrast and what I can achieve with both methods. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a copy of the actual image. So I click on the image, right click and create a virtual copy. That will allow me now to edit both and let you see how I've progressed with each of them. Right, first of all in Lightroom, the first thing I would actually do in Lightroom is I would go to the basic panel and I would look at the white balance. Now I know it was particularly overcast this day, hence the very high ISO. So I'll try a shady, and you can see that has given us a nice warm feeling to our image, which actually looks quite nice, I think. So now I'll go to cropping the image. Cropping down. My initial thoughts of this was that it looked quite nice with the frame round it in this sort of form. Now, whenever I actually looked at it and go, I don't actually particularly like, there's a lot of clutter and things, so I'm going to actually tighten in on my frame quite considerably. And I'm going to move the bird over onto possibly up onto sort of a third, and I think I'll be happy with that sort of crop. Looks quite nice. So now I'll go to my normal Lightroom process. That would be decrease my highlights, push my shadows, set a white point. Again, I hold down the Alt key, move the slider until I start to see white speckles. They've just come in at the bottom, so I would back off again. So I'll be happy enough for that as a white point. Black, again, I actually prefer my blacks crushed a little bit because it gives a lot more contrast into the photograph. And with a nature photograph we would normally push the clarity up quite high, possibly 20-25. Push up the vibrance again, probably 10-15. But in the process of doing all this, what we've actually done is we've just increased the noise that we actually have, and you can see it very clearly here as this sort of patterny type area in the background. The way we deal with that in Lightroom is if we go down to the details panel and we look at the luminance, which controls the noise. As you can see here, you can see the noise quite well. So increase the luminance, and yeah, need to be up, really up about 80 on luminance, and I could increase the detail a little bit again, but if I zoom out on that, you can see I have really softened the bird up. Mind you, it gives it quite a pleasant effect, but really not what we're looking at for a nature shot. So I think I would need to back that luminance again, so the luminance back again, probably to where I'm getting a little bit more detail in the bird, and yeah, around about 30 would give me some sort of reasonable sort of compromise. But as you can see there, we still have got a reasonable amount of noise in it. So I'm going to move across now and process the same image in Photoshop, and this is the way I would normally handle a high noise image of this sort of nature. So I go back to the copy that we haven't touched, it untouched. Before going to Lightroom, what I'm going to do is just put this similar type of crop onto it. Something about there. Mightn't be totally exact, but not far away. Go OK. To give it the same sort of look as well, I think I'm going to also change the white balance again down to shady. So again, we're going to be comparing like with like. So that's it. Right click on it, edit in Photoshop. So that's us. It'll now start to load Photoshop. Right, now that Photoshop is opened, you'll see that it's opened with our image as a background layer. What I want to do to keep a non-destructive type editing in place, I'm going to make a copy of that just in case I make a mistake. I drag it down onto the new layer. Could easily have done it as Control J. So the first thing I actually see is I'm going to turn off that background so that we only get one image showing at a time. The first thing that sort of draws my attention here is this looks to be very, very distracting. And what I actually want to do is at some point I actually want to edit the background and the foreground totally separately. So to do that I have to put both those items on different levels. So the way I go about doing that is if I go to Quick Selection tool, and normally what you would do is just drag this over your image and make a selection. Makes a pretty good job of it, but in the latest version of Photoshop, if you use the select subject, it makes an even better job as a first attempt at it. So here we are. It's now selecting the object. You can see we've got the marching ants around our subject. It looks quite good. Missed this part of the branch which I want to hold on to. So I'm going to go right up to there. We've now got a little bit too much there, so just push Alt and take that off. Right, so I've got a relatively good selection there, but I want to just check, and what I'll do is go to Select and Mask. Under Select and Mask you can see the red area is areas that are not selected, and the bright areas are areas that are selected. I can see there's something sort of wrong here, and I would certainly like to tidy up some of these edges a little bit. So if I zoom in, which is Control Plus on the keyboard, you can see here there are a few feathers. It might have been beneficial if I could have got those. So I could use the Quick Selection tool, but we've already used it. So what I'll be using here is the Refine Edge tool. So the Refine Edge tool, make it a little bit smaller, and we'll start here at the beak. You can see there is some extra feathers there, so if I select that and draw over it and draw down there and let go, you'll see now that hopefully it has picked up some of those areas. I want to try around the top of the head a little bit and down there. Again, I have picked up some there, some. Try it again just there a few times. Yeah, I've got a lot more of the detail going on there. So if I hold down the spacebar key now, I can drag my image about so I can see a bit more of it, and yeah, I can see areas here. If I do that, select that area, made a relatively good job. Maybe missed something here, a wee bit there. So going and let's just do the refine here as well. Up those, get those, and yeah, it's done a relatively good job. If I zoom on down round the tail, you can see here, round here, and let go, and it hasn't done a particularly good job on that. So another tool that we can use is just the ordinary paintbrush brush, and I'm going to increase the size of that. That's using the square keys. Well, obviously first things is get rid of that bit there, and I can bring in a little bit more of this edges, and the way I'm doing that is I'm clicking at the start of where I want to select, holding down the shift key, and that will draw in a straight line. So just a little bit more around there. Just doing this fairly quickly. seems to be, not sure if that, yeah, we've missed a little bit there. And yes, I'm fairly happy with that. Normally what I would do now would be to output this to a layer mask, but what I actually want to show is making a selection of it first. So output to selection, go OK. So I've now got a selection around my bird, and what I'm going to do, Control 0 gives me the full view. Yes, up here I've got everything around it. Now what I'm going to do is going to go to select, and I am going to save that selection. I'm going to save that selection as bird, B-I-R-D, and go OK, because I will be using that selection later on in the process. So I've now got a selection. What I want to do is I want to make that onto a new layer. So I can do Control and J will give me a new layer, and I've now got my bird on a new layer, but I would also like that as a layer mask on it. So again, now my problem is I've lost my selection. So if I need my selection again, I can go back to select, load selection, down here and pick bird up and do OK. I've got my bird. Now what I want to do is I want to make a mask. So I've now got my bird and it's masked out. So if I turn off the background layer, you'll see I've now got my bird on a complete separate layer. Now what I actually want to do is I'm going to deal with the background layer first. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off my bird and protect it. So obviously one of the ways I could get rid of the noise here is to blur the actual background, and that does a really good job, and that is what I'm going to do. But first I'm going to get rid of this little distraction over here. So I'm going to go to the polygon lasso tool, select that and go, keeping relatively close but not needing to get that close to it. Close it off, then go to Edit, Fill, Content Where, and Photoshop will work its magic in a few seconds and will remove that hopefully fairly cleanly. Now that we've got rid of the branch up in the top left hand corner, we're going to blur the background to try and eliminate that noise. I'm going to do this two ways, a right way and a wrong way. And what I'll do is I'm going to make a copy of the background, so what I'm doing the right and the wrong way. Turn that one off and I'm going to work on this copy. So the way we normally get rid of the noise is to blur the background. So all I would do is go to Filter, Blur Gallery, Gaussian Blur, and I would pull the blur, the radius back down and start to increase it gently until I start to notice a fairly clean image. Well, jumpy a little bit. Certainly anything above 4 to 5 there, we'll just stick it up a little bit higher for demonstration purposes, because this is the wrong version. I just want to highlight exactly what can happen. So go OK. So if I zoom in now, you'll see that we have removed all of the noise from the background. Problem is we have also blurred our bird quite extensively, but we still have our safe copy of our bird on the top. So there's our bird on the top. Now one of the problems, and this is where I've made a deliberate mistake, is we still see it very soft around the edges, and the reason for that is that because when we blurred this background level, we actually were blurring the bird at that time, and what you're actually seeing is fringings of the bird out round that. So that is the wrong way. So if I turn on this layer, this is the layer that I saved that we hadn't actually changed yet, and the way we go about that is if I go Control and 0 to see the full image, I go to Select, Load Selection, find my bird, select the bird, then I go to Select, modify, expand, and I expand it by about 15 pixels. You'll see the bird has been well and truly covered. So now I just go to Edit on the layer that's actually active, go to Edit, Fill, Content Aware Fill, and what we'll actually do is we will take the bird out of the situation altogether. Then we can blur the background as we did previously, and we won't have that annoying edges all around the bird that we have saved on our top layer. So it'll take a few seconds. Now I've got rid of our bird. Just hit Control D to take off the selection and made it relatively good. We could soften that up a little bit, but we're going to blur it in a few seconds anyway. So we're going to now blur that background, so it's just going to be back to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. You don't need to use as much. I think probably 4 or 5 would probably be more than adequate. We've now got our background blurred. If we turn back on our bird, you can see we've now got a much sharper bird, bearing in mind he wasn't that sharp to start with. So I've now got it, and I would go on to the finishing stages. Just going to delete that layer there to save confusion. That's the one that was blurred incorrectly. So now I go on to the finishing stages. What I'd like to do is brighten the bird up a little bit. I certainly would like to work on its eyes and brighten it a wee bit, and maybe highlight the beak a little bit. So I'm going to do that in a two-stage process. First one, select the bird layer, go to put a curves layer on, curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to start by brightening the bird up and giving him a wee bit more contrast. So brighten it up, brighten the highlights a wee bit, and bring down my shadows to give it a little bit of an S-curve. But you can see I've actually done the same to the background. I didn't want to touch the background, so if I use a clipping layer, so I clip that curves layer to the layer below, so I can do that in one of two ways. The first time I'm going to do it, here we just select this little icon down here. You can see the background hasn't changed now. If I turn that off and on, you'll see it's made quite a difference to the bird. It started to bring him out a lot better. So that's it. And now I want to work on the eye. So again, same again, curves layer. This time I want to brighten the eye. I'm just watching the eye, nice bright eye, and I'm going to clip that to the bird. This time what I'm going to do is I hold down the Alt key and move between the two layers. Click that, you'll find now I have just brightened the bird. But as it's only the eye I want to brighten, I want to inverse this. So all I do is click on the mask and hit invert. Alternatively, what I could have done is hit Control I. It does the same thing. Now what I want to do is lighten the eye a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in by hitting Control plus spacebar to pan across. Use the brush key, and now I'm going to use a fairly low flow rate, and I'm going to brush white, nothing happening, so I change that over to white, and brush again and make sure I'm on the mask. Yes, I'm brightening the mask up. Now you can see I'm brightening the eye. Now, beauty of using a mask is if I get it wrong, all I do is change it back to black. I could just have hit X on the keyboard, which would have done the same thing, swap the two foreground and background, but I'm just painting over around the eye, the area I don't want. I'm going to try X again white and just bring up the front of its beak a little bit and lift that a little bit up. It'll look a little bit sharper. So back to Control 0. That's it. now. The final thing I would do is put a vignette on it, and the way I put a vignette on it is by a process that was first shown to me by Ross McKelvey at a CPA training that he gave many years ago, and it is use the regular Marquette tool, draw a border on approximately where you want. Then what I do, go select, modify, and feather that 200 pixels, but that'll depend really on the resolution of your image. That'll give you nice curved corners on it. And then because I've now selected the inside, I actually want the outside selected, so I'll just go select, invert, and using my favorite tool again, curves layer, so do curves. This time, rather than brighten, I want to darken, so I'm pulling it down from the center. Keep a wee bit of the highlights in, so that's okay. And we've now got our vignette on it, and that's basically it finished as such. Just to see it all, what I do is highlight the top layer, bottom layer, put it just into a group, turn on the original. So if I turn that off, that's what we came from. That's where we've got to. We've got our background nicely smoothed out. Final thing I do is under layers, flatten the lot, hit file and save, and lo and behold, we've got our image back into Lightroom, where you do a secondary process on it if you thought it was necessary. That's the image from Photoshop. That's the image from Lightroom. As you can see, there's considerably a lot more noise. Hopefully you'll think that the image that I've got from Photoshop is a little bit better, and certainly we could have done a lot more work to it with a little bit more time. Thank you for your attention. All the best.